lands, card draw, and ramp spells. In the last year and a half, I've researched deeply and made videos to find the optimal average number of lands, card draw, and ramp you should be playing in your commander decks. We use hypergeometric probability to minimize mana floods and mana screw. We use the hot garbage model to find the point where ramp stops paying off. We conducted a full breakdown of card draw types, to smooth draws, to improve card quality, and also to scale for advantage. Our favorite CEDH word, advantage. 3 separate deep dive videos, and every time I published any of them, the comments always say the same thing. You can't talk about lands without ramp. You can't possibly account for ramp and lands without card draw. You can't talk about card draw and ignore the mana to pay for it all. You have all been shouting that lands, ramp, and draw are linked. And guess what? You're f***ing right. I know they're linked, and you know they're linked. But no one has ever really tied it all together neatly like a grand unified theory of some kind. Maybe it's impossible. Maybe it's just a massive waste of time. Or maybe I figured it out. So, if you're ready, let's begin. Time walking as a concept is somewhat widely understood, but loosely used whenever a player has some form of upper hand on value over another, either getting an extra land for a turn or denying usage of mana. The point today isn't so much to define what time walking means specifically, but just more the concept itself. What does time walking someone comprise of? How do we define value in a way where we can leverage it? Because value in all of its understanding is vague. Anything can be value. The answer is, it actually doesn't matter. Time walking is casting and explore, being able to play 1 extra land and draw 1 extra card. Excuse the whole nuance of taking whole extra turn of extra combats, all that stuff. The Mike Flores answer to my question of value is, every turn in Magic the Gathering, you draw 1 card and you get to play 1 land. That's it. That's the clock every player at every table is running on, regardless of deck, format, or even number of opponents. 1 card, 1 land, every turn for everyone. Very fair. So that is 1 unit of value, the baseline, the atomic output of a single turn of Magic. Every card in your deck either exceeds that baseline, falls below it, or has no relation to it at all. Like a Grizzly Bears. Grizzly Bears doesn't ramp or draw cards. This just shows that value is multi-dimensional. We'll talk about context after this. And this is the entire foundation of our model today. Whenever a card helps us exceed the neutral output of 1 card and 1 land per turn, its value becomes additive. Yes, we are going down 1 card in hand to cast a spell, but the effect has untethered us from this baseline. For example, a rampant growth sets us up for the next turn to have 1 extra land than we would have, almost like we took a whole extra turn. An opt lets us see a card that would have also taken another draw step to access. An additional card and a land from a single spell is a full time walk, 1 whole unit of value. So rampant growth is worth 0.5. Sky Shroud Claim, 2 lands, is worth 1 whole point. A divination is now also worth 1 point. Just sit with that for a second. I know you have opinions, just hold them for a little longer. This equivalency between lands and cards as components of value is the foundation of how we connect lands, ramp, and card draw. It's a shared language now. So before we get any further, as you can tell, today's video is going to be especially complex. And if you want to take everything you're going to learn from today's video and apply it to your own deck, you definitely can. But there's a much easier way of doing it because I built a new deck building website specifically for that. It includes all of the learnings we have in all of our videos to help you pick the right amount of lands, draw, ramp, etc. specific to your commander's mana value as we identified in the last mana curve video. The website is currently in private beta for Patreon supporters. Everyone will be able to access it for free. But also for Patreon supporters, you can submit your deck directly in the website and I'll be able to see it on my end and get a real review from me. It's available to every tier on Patreon, so as cheap as $5 you can access this website right now. But no pressure at all. This tool will be available in public in a couple more weeks of refinement, and I guarantee none of the features that are useful for deck building will ever be behind a pay gate. Alright, off to part 2. So there's one more wrinkle worth naming before we go any further. I know you're all thinking it, because I talk about this quite a bit too. Commander is not a 1v1 game. We have 3 opponents, not 1. Which means the scale of effective value at this table is different from every other format this framework could apply to. When you play a ramping growth in 1v1, you are pulling ahead of one player by a half a unit of value. When you play the same ramping growth in Commander, you are pulling ahead of 3 players simultaneously with that same half unit. The card itself didn't change. The multiplier did. In certain cards like Rhystic Study, Smothering Tide, and Propaganda, extract value from 3 sources at once in a way that has no equivalent in 1v1 Magic at all, because there's only one opponent. So this is all to say that the change in scale is real, and we actually talk about how to leverage the difference in scale and how to play to it in the video How to Build Midrange Decks in Commander. Go check it out. Today we are measuring value relative to your own game plan, what your deck needs to generate to do the thing, and whether your lands, ramp, and draw are delivering the output reliably. The multiplayer coefficient, or scale, matters enormously, like the impact of a counterspell in a 4-player game, the incredible amounts of value you get in casting a board wipe of 3 opponents worth of creatures. But that doesn't change our baseline unit today of resource generation. 1 card and 1 land per turn is still what every player starts with, regardless of how many opponents are sitting across from them. So now that we got that out of the way, the reason that the ramp versus draw argument has never really been resolved in Commander content, not by me, not by anyone, is that players have been using 2 different languages with no shared currency. Ramp counts mana, draw counts cards. Neither counts are incorrect, but there was no common unit that translates between them. That was kind of the big problem, the golden question that I've been trying to answer. And that's what this unit of value gives us. 1 language, 1 baseline. Now every card can be evaluated against as deviations from the consistent natural starting point of every turn in Magic. 1 land, 1 draw. Now this isn't some quantum deck building miracle that's gonna give us every answer, but basically it's the alphabet we're going to be using in this video to answer one problem: the relationship between land, ramp, and draw. We can finally start getting into it. So we talked quite a bit about this shared unit of value. The next layer to this is what separates a concept that's technically correct to one that's actually kind of useful. Ramping growth generates a half unit of value, half a time walk. But ramping growth on turn 2 of a game, where you need to reach 5 mana by turn 4, is worth dramatically more than ramping growth on turn 7 when you already have 8 lands somehow. The unit of value we just defined is still the same. Ramping growth is worth 0.5, but the impact, as I highlighted, is not the same. This is what we call effective value. The unit is constant. The context, however, clearly isn't. Ramp's effective value is highest before you hit your threshold, or the mana value where your game plan becomes operational, or does the thing. Every ramp piece you play before this threshold represents futures that you could cash in. Because now that you have 1 extra land, every subsequent turn you take afterwards, you've gone +1 on your potential of what spells you can cast. And as you spend all your mana each turn, now you can see that the land has a lot more opportunity to give you a lot more futures to cash in on. But after the threshold, where you already have enough mana, the ramp came too late, which is part of what we talk about in the hot garbage model in the ramp video. Turn 7 Talisman? Hot garbage. Mulligan with 1 land and an arcane signet? Also hot garbage. Context matters. And talking about context, card draw runs the opposite direction entirely from ramp. Early in the game, your hand is full, unless you mulligan to 3. And your problem is mainly mana, not options. Draw is almost wasted. And I'm saying almost here because I know draw can improve the quality of your options, but as the game extends, as your hand depletes and your lands sit in play with nothing left to do, every draw spell multiplies your remaining options. Instead of locking you to the 1 draw, now you get to see 2 things or 3 things and have better choices. Its effective value climbs the longer the game goes. Ramp and draw are directly inverse each other in terms of effective value. It's not always true, but the general inverse relationship is why you need both. Not just whichever one scores higher in units of value in isolation. Ramp without draw means you hit your threshold and then run out of gas. Draw without ramp means you're holding a full hand of cards you never get to cast. You remove one leg, the other one collapses. That's why you're all right. It's tied. So, we have this unit of value. We know through context and effective value that ramp and draw are inverse each other. But here's the question that actually matters. How do we know when we have enough of each? This is the golden question I've been chasing. What does enough ramp even mean? Enough relative to what? Enough by when? So many questions. The answer to all of this is your mana curve. Specifically, your commander or your key win con's mana value and the turn you need to cast it. It's a signal of demand. And this phrasing is very important. It's telling you what you need to have available and when. Your curve is signaling that you need to match that demand. The target of where you need to cast your spells and when is what dictates when you need more ramp and when you need more draw. The earlier the spell needs to land, or the higher the cost, the more ramp you need. And the higher value of something like a dark ritual becomes compared to a talisman. The later your game plan needs to sustain or survive to, the more card draw becomes the priority. The unit of value just makes it more precise instead of kind of an intuition. But what are we here to solve for today, aside from pontificating on this lofty concept of measuring value and tying your mana curve and game plan and all that? We're here to find better numbers so that our decks break less. We are all very intimate with the experience of our decks breaking on us. They let us down all the time. The mana never came together, you ran out of gas at the wrong moment, your deck was never able to do the thing or was a turn behind the entire night. You probably recognize all of this. I do. You just probably didn't have a name for what was happening. But when we map our 3 resources against the escalation curve, it becomes obvious. There are 3 distinct ways your deck breaks down. 3 failure modes every commander player has experienced and no one has articulated cleanly until now. No lands? You can't play spells. No ramp? You can't meet the table's pressure. No draw? You run out of steam after setup. The 3 failures. This is Liebig's law of the minimum, the agricultural concept that crop yield is constrained by whichever nutrient is most scarce, regardless of how abundant the others are. If you have 12 ramp pieces and 12 draw spells but only 28 lands, your deck can't function. The land floor is so low that neither ramp nor draw can deliver the units of value. But we know all these problems. What makes the 3 failures genuinely so interesting is that they don't operate on the same timescale. And that's exactly why players continuously misdiagnose their deck problems. They're conflating 3 different things that destroys you, whoever destroys them, at different speeds or different moments of the game. Land failure is catastrophic and immediate. You miss your land drops in the first 3 turns and the game's over. You don't get to compensate, there is no recovery, it's over. You mulligan down to 5 to get a barely playable hand and live with the fact that you're okay not casting half your hand that costs 3 or more, and you pray for a land top deck you might miss. That's not bad luck, that's a land floor problem. That's what it looks like when the first leg of this value chair is too short. Everything else in your deck, the 12 ramp pieces, the 12 draw spells, whatever number you're playing with, completely irrelevant until you have enough lands in play to cast them. The floor has to exist before the ceiling of power can matter, which leads us to the next order of failure. Ramp failure is a ceiling problem. You can play to the curve, you can still win games, but you'll plateau at a mana level your opponents will eventually surpass if they have ramp and you don't. You're never quite doing more than your fair share each turn. This failure is gradual. It limits your upside rather than crashing your floor immediately the way land failure does. This is why the convention of why you need to play ramp and spend the first few turns ramping commander is so common. It's only true because the relative expected power you may run into is playing at mana levels that is above the baseline of 1 land, 1 card per turn. If everyone played with 1 land, 1 card per turn, the pressure to ramp is not as high. It's still good for you because you play ahead of the table, but it's not the same. We love ramp and we love draw, and all of this explains why. And talking about draw failure is the quiet one, and the quiet ones are the ones you should always kind of worry about. You won't notice it until turn 7 or turn 5 when you're top decking and 3 other players are playing cards of a full grip because they're playing Ristic Study in bracket 3, and no one is paying the tax. The priority order of failures to address is lands first, ramp second, draw third. This is not arbitrary. It's ordered by how fast and how permanently each failure beats you, and you fix them in the order you can least afford to ignore them. So, what does a commander player actually do with all of this information? Units of value, effective value, inverse relationships, the escalation curve telling you what you need and when, 3 failure modes operating on 3 different timescales. You didn't sit down all this time to watch me yap about philosophy. I mean, maybe you did, I don't know you, but you came here to build better decks, and I'm here to solve that for you. So let's talk about how to build better decks. Step 1. Pin your operational threshold. We briefly mentioned the phrase earlier in the video, but have repeated time and time again. This is where your key time of action is. When you do the thing, usually it's your commander's mana value. This single number is the independent variable that everything in your deck calibrates around. Which leads us to step 2. Pull up the mana curve table. If you watched last week's video, you already have it. The table tells you how many spells to run at each mana value based on your commander's cost. Step 3. Set your ramp and draw. This is where the grand unified theory of value is providing most clarity on. The actual numbers of what to play that isn't just cut a land for every X cantrips or dorks. The combined ramp plus draw budget is always 24 slots. You always have at least 38 lands based on the hot garbage model. These are fixed numbers. What moves is how the 24 ramp plus draw budget splits, and your threshold tells you exactly where, because as I mentioned earlier, context matters. If we want maximum effective value out of our cards, we need to play them around our operational threshold. With 4 mana value commanders like Lathril, Teysa, or Atraxa, this is the baseline, easy 12 ramp and 12 draw. Now if we go higher like a 5, 6, 7, or even 8 mana value commanders like Razia because you're sicko like me, the higher your threshold, the more pressure ramp puts on your early game. Every ramp piece before the threshold is generating its highest effective value as we showed earlier. So you shift the slots out of draw into ramp, 14 ramp and 10 draw. You're not losing draw permanently because before you hit 8 mana, the effective value of ramp exceeds the effective value of draw. You don't need more cards to choose from, we just need to play our big angel with a flaming sword. And in the other extreme, with low mana value commanders like Yoshimaru, who's a good boy, your threshold is almost immediate. Ramp has very little pressure on you because your mana demands are already met. So you shift ramp slots into draw. 8 ramp, 16 draw for a 1 or 2 drop commander. 10 ramp and 14 draw for a 3 mana value commander. So here's a quick TLDR. Every one of these is a zero-sum trade within the 24 slot budget. We're now making principled trades based on where each resource generates the most effective value relative to your game plan. And that connects directly to the 3 failures. More ramp at high threshold prevents ceiling failure. You hit your mana on time. More draw at low thresholds prevents failure to play the long game. You don't run out of gas after dumping your whole hand out in 3 turns. And the land floor underneath all of this prevents the one catastrophic failure you can never recover from. So, those 3 steps. Identify your threshold, plot the curve, and adjust the ratio. And if you just want a much easier way of doing it, as I said earlier in the video, you could just do it on the website that I created instead of doing all that math in your head because I'm not a math person. I know, ironic, right? If you want to apply all the learnings from this series of videos into your own deck, it literally is as simple as pressing a single button. But also the website will have exclusive articles that are available to patrons 2 weeks in advance from everyone else. So as I said, if you don't want to spend any money at all, everything will be public. Not a problem. The point of this website is to get you excited to deck build and make better decks. I will never let anything jeopardize that. Link is in the description box below. You know, I'll be honest, when I wrote all this, I thought I was done. This was my opus. This is the best thing I'll ever write, best thing I'll ever make. Turns out that was wrong, because after solving one problem, I've identified another one that I'm quickly gonna solve. And it's a problem that everyone has. I'm gonna finally solve how to actually calculate relative power of your deck so that you can easily find games that your deck, no matter by restriction, if it's bracket 2, 3, or 4, can get an even game.